We're still a little over a week away from free agency, but we already had a blockbuster move. That's right. If you haven't heard, Deebo Samuel traded to the Commanders for a 5th-round pick. What does it mean for the teams? What does it mean for fantasy? Let's break it down. Let's start, first of all, as a Commanders fan, I actually really like this trade for the Commanders. I feel like a 5th-round pick is a pretty low-risk, investment for a guy who could have a high return, a high reward. I mean, I don't think we're going to see the Deebo Samuel we saw a few years ago, but if he can get back anything close to that kind of a player, it's a guy that the Commanders badly needed. We knew the 49ers, there were some talks it might be Ayuk that gets traded, but it made more sense to trade Ayuk. So I think this is pretty much a win-win for both sides here as far as if we just look at it from a game NFL type perspective. But what does it mean for fantasy? Let's start, because that's what most of you know. We play fantasy here at the end game. That's what we do. So I'm sure that's what you care about. So let's start with Deebo Samuel. I think it's got to be good for Deebo Samuel. I'm not ready to say I'm back in on Deebo Samuel necessarily, but I think now he goes from a guy that I was probably mostly going to just, pass on in drafts, in underdog drafts, in fantasy drafts, to now it's I'll take some shots on Deebo Samuel. I'll get some exposure to him, because obviously the Commanders, have a plan for Deebo Samuel. They wanted Deebo Samuel. It's not like a 5th-round pick is completely nothing here. I mean, they gave up something for him. And they need a Deebo Samuel type. I've talked about it this offseason. They needed that guy, and last year that guy was Zach Ertz, who, no disrespect to Zach Ertz, he was fine, but Zach Ertz isn't going to give you any explosives, right? Sure, you need 6 yards, he can get you 8, but he's not going to get you 30, 40, 50. And Deebo can still do that from time to time. And you look at Deebo last year, there's some stats going around pre-pneumonia, post-pneumonia. He was actually still pretty good pre-pneumonia. He's still one of the best yard after catch receivers in the entire NFL. So I'm not all the way back in on Deebo, but I think now I'm more comfortable drafting Deebo, assuming his ADP doesn't jump way up, which I hope it doesn't. We will see. But I'm now more comfortable actually taking some shots on Deebo, because the upside, I believe, is still there. No, I don't think we're going to see, what we saw, what was it, back in 2021 or whatever it was. But I think there's still potential for Deebo in this Commanders offense, which, again, needs a guy like Deebo. I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to get the most out of Deebo here. So I'll take some shots on Deebo. Now, of course, for the other Commanders, Terry McLaurin, I think we do have to downgrade him just a little bit. I'm not going to all out on Terry McLaurin or anything here, but Deebo is going to take more targets than, Zach Ertz, Diami Brown, whoever the secondary pass catchers were for the Commanders last year. Deebo is going to take some targets away from Terry, but Terry's going to still have those explosives, those big plays, the touchdown upside. So I'm still very comfortable drafting Terry McLaurin. Probably just go from a top, I don't know where I had Terry, maybe top 12 to 15 receiver to maybe more a 15 to 20 type receiver, but still a very strong pick in my eyes. I think the guy that probably takes the biggest hit here, honestly, is going to be Zach Ertz, because again, Zach Ertz was that guy last year, that kind of short, intermediate guy that really, because he was all they really had. He was their best option. Now you got to think Deebo is going to take a big part of that role. So Zach Ertz, he really was a very solid week in, week out producer at the tight end position last year, but now I wonder if maybe, that's going to be out the window here. Sure, maybe he's going to be worth a stream here or there, or there will be some weeks where he pops off, people pick him up, they stream him, and then he does nothing. So I was looking at Zach Ertz as a value at the tight end position this year in drafts, but probably going to back off of Zach Ertz a little bit now. Now, what about on the 49ers side? Because, of course, this big effect to the 49ers. There were some talks that, hey, maybe Brandon Ayuk was going to be the wide receiver to be traded. Now you got to think that's out the window. I can't imagine them trading Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. That would be absolutely crazy for a team that, yes, despite what happened last year, is still in a Super Bowl window. I think they're comfortable going into next season with Brandon Ayuk. Look, Juwan Jennings, yeah, maybe he sputtered down the stretch for fantasy, but he's still a type of player that Kyle Shanahan's going to love. He's a great blocker. Great in the run game, so I think they're just going to look at him as a guy there. And then, of course, remember, they drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round last year. We did not see a lot of Ricky Pearsall because, of course, he got shot in the offseason. But when we did see him down the stretch, he did show signs that he was starting to figure things out, starting to come on. So I think this is a big bump for Ricky Pearsall, honestly. I know Juwan Jennings is probably going to get the biggest bump in terms of ADP. He's going to be the guy most, fantasy drafters are going to know, they're going to go after. But I think Pearsall is going to get more of that slot work in this offense. So I think Pearsall might be the guy I'm taking more shots on. I think Jennings is fine. I still think Ayuk is being drafted a little too highly based on the fact that he's coming off an ACL injury and may not even be ready week 1. And we've seen these players, running backs, wide receivers, first year off ACL, not typically very productive. So I'll take some shots on Juwan Jennings, but I think Ricky Pearsall is the guy I'm going to really want to take shots on, especially if his ADP doesn't get a big bump from this. Like if Ayuk's ADP gets a bump, Jennings' ADP gets a bump, and maybe Pearsall just gets a slight bump, he's probably going to be the guy I'm going to be taking shots on. And I think this is also really good for George Kittle. I mean, George Kittle had a great season last year. I think he's set up now to have another very good season in San Francisco. So I like Pearsall. I like Kittle. Jennings is fine. Ayuk, still a little nervous about coming off the ACL. Of course, I didn't talk about Jaden Daniels. This has got to be good for Jaden Daniels, another weapon for him. But he's already being drafted like the QB3 in fantasy. So, yeah, I'm not going to start drafting him over Lamar or Josh Allen. But makes me feel a little bit better about his floor, at least, because now he's got another weapon there. So, overall, I think it's good for both sides from a real-life perspective. I think it's probably good for Deebo. Like, if there's anything left for Deebo, this is probably the best place he could go. And, look, I think it's good for the 49ers receivers, Jennings, Pearsall. Give these guys a chance. It was time to move on from Deebo. So, there you go. There's my breakdown of the Deebo Samuel trade, the big trade that went down in the NFL already. I'm sure we'll have many more. Drop a comment down below. What do you think about the trade? How do you think it affects things for fantasy? Let me know down below. And if you missed any of our videos, especially the video breaking down the 5 players that everyone else kind of loves, but I really don't, well, you can check it out in this one right here.